What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I am making a video today because there's a couple things that I want to talk about. I want to give some updates on what's going on with the draft. There have been some updates to the status of OTAs. Up until now, we're expecting that they were going to be postponed indefinitely. But there have been some updates, so they are going to there are some guidelines that have been agreed upon that we'll get to, and then there is another bit of whatever fodder for the rumor mill, regarding the situation with the Dolphins and whether or not they want to trade up to the number 1 pick, etc. So first of all, just the couple quick updates on the draft. So as we know, it's not going to have it's not in Vegas anymore. It's not going to have any kind of like live audience. It's going to be 100% virtual. They did a thing where they talked to a bunch of the players, right? They have a bunch of the top players, including Tua and Joe Burrow and Chase Young, and right, like a bunch of the top players. They got input from those players on like how they would want to interact with Roger Goodell when they walk up on the stage, and what kind of reaction they would want to have when they go up there, which is obviously a little silly because you never know exactly how you're going to react, and the authenticity of the genuine feel in that moment is part of the appeal. But they can get creative, I guess, and have some fun with it. So, and it's, working within the parameters that they're given. So, obviously they got to do something. But so they're going to do that. They'll have, they have little interactions set up. And, as I've been, a fun little side prediction or whatever, that I've been talking about is that, I've been saying, Roger Goodell could just do it sitting in his home, where he reads the cards. He's sitting at his desk in his little office and he reads the cards, whatever, and then like they FaceTime in with the prospects or whatever. And so, Roger Goodell's going to sit at home and he's going to read the cards. But of course, that makes sense. It's not exactly some, astounding prediction or anything. And to be fair, it wasn't really much of a prediction. It was more like that's, what they should do because that's what makes sense. But that is what they're going to do. So next I want to, transition into OTAs, because there's going to be, at least for the first part of this, league year, right, as in the draft and then like OTAs, there's going to be a theme. And so it looks like they are going to be trying to put on some sort of like virtual OTAs. So here's what the report says from ESPN. NFL and players agree on voluntary offseason home workout plan. The NFL and the NFLPA on Monday finalized plans for modified offseason workout rules to govern a 2020 offseason in which the coronavirus pandemic is preventing teams from gathering at team facilities. According to a league memo obtained by ESPN, under the plan of all offseason work aside from mandatory June minicamp is voluntary for players, as it is in a normal year. The memo also states that no team is required to hold an off-season program in any league year according to the collective bargaining agreement, but that if teams decide to hold off-season workout programs this year, classroom instruction and on-field activities that customarily take place at the club facility are being supplanted by online classroom instruction and virtual workouts for an indeterminate period. So for now, this is a solution that can work, right? Because early on, right, once they get to the point where like into training camp and stuff like that, when you're supposed to be like having padded practices, etc., then it will start to become an issue again if this pandemic continues on that long. And there definitely is potential for that. This certainly could go on for at least another few months. And so if that's the case, then there will be new challenges that they will have to overcome if they're going to want to have a 2020 season. So this is a fix for now because the classroom stuff obviously can be done virtually, right? They can set up, Zoom, I think is the new one nowadays. I mean, you know, there's Skype and FaceTime to individually talk to people if they need to. And then they have, you know, things like Zoom and other conference call software in which you can, you know, do group instructions. So, I mean, obviously they can make that work. They can implement the, you know, the playbooks, etc., and they can talk to their guys. So that's not a problem. It's when the on-field stuff comes around, there could be issues there, and we'll have to wait and see how it goes. The rules for virtual off-season programs state that no NFL team is required to participate in the virtual period, which is defined as running from April 20th to May 15th, and that a team may conduct classroom work online even if it doesn't assign its players specific workouts. If a team decides to hold an off-season program, its players would receive their customary per diem payments just as if they were there in person, $235 minimum per day, and would be entitled to receive any off-season workout bonuses specified in their contracts, provided they fulfill the participation requirements their contracts specify. So, personally, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't do that, especially if they want to have the season kick off like normal. They would have to pay out those contracts anyway, so the money shouldn't be a big deal unless they're really that greedy and they want to try and, you know, make sure that they don't have to pay those guys, which is kind of a dick move if that was what they did. But if they want the season to kick off when it's supposed to, they got to be as ready as possible, especially, I mean, because at this point they're hoping and planning that, you know, on-field workouts and then preseason, etc., is not going to be affected by this, but it very well could be. Not to mention, you know, the economic, you know, woes that are being felt from this and other things, etc. So there are a lot of factors that could cause massive issues for the NFL season going forward. Most notably, obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic that is going on. So, you know, like I said, for now, this is something that can definitely work. And it should, you know, I mean, again, there's only but so far you should go, right? Like, I think it's fair to do as much as possible to keep business going, you know, as normal, but there absolutely has to be firm limits, you know. So if in a month or two, you know, when things are supposed to kick off in person, or, you know, when training camp comes around, if there's still, you know, significant, and I've been tracking, you know, the numbers on this, it's not slowing down. The numbers, especially in this country, the numbers, we have more than three times the amount of cases as the next highest country, and we lead the world in deaths at this point, and it's still trending up. We're not slowing down yet, so you have to slow down before it can stop, before you can get to a point where people can safely go back out into public. And so, you know, there is a distinct possibility it could go on for another few months. If it gets to the point where training camp comes around and they can't do on-field workouts, then there's gonna be, you know, a lot more problems that will arise, especially then because, you know, there's the term football shape, right? Like, guys work out in the off season for sure, but they don't generally do the same kind of stuff. Now, there could be some, you know, guidelines set and some, you know, homework assignments given to these guys for workouts, for sure, by their teams, but generally it's not the same level of intensity and so on and so forth. So the workouts that they do on their own don't necessarily get them into football shape for the season. So if they don't have those on-field workouts, that could also be a potential problem. Anyway, if a team declines to participate in the April 20th through May 15th virtual period, then it will not be permitted to conduct an off-season workout program after that period ends, whether virtual or on-field. Wow, so that's interesting. Well, all the more reason why they should do it. I mean, if they don't participate in that voluntary period, then they're not going to be allowed to hold. So that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if any teams at all opt out of it. Following May 15th, every team will have 6 weeks worth of offseason program time available to it, whether it used its 3 weeks from April 20th to May 15th or not. So, I mean, I guess afterwards it might not really matter, but the memo leaves open the possibility that COVID-19 restrictions could be eased or lifted after May 15th, but allows for the possibility that off-season programs would have to be conducted virtually after that date as well. It specifies that no team's off-season program can run past June 26th, and perhaps most importantly, that if any team's facility remains closed because of COVID-19, then all 32 team facilities must remain closed as well. And that's smart. They should. Because we all have to look. Part of the problem in this country, especially if they start talking about, opening up certain states again, like California, New York, or whatever, like Cuomo just said that the worst is behind them. I'm not so sure about that, because there are still states that haven't done full lockdowns. It's gonna bounce around through the country, and there'll be waves of it if they start opening places up, and then more people will fall victim to it, and then it'll just get out of control yet again. So everybody has to do it all at once, otherwise you're not actually going to stop it. You'll just, again, it'll come in waves. So I mean, we'll have to wait and see. There's a lot that goes into this, and we're still months out, but every day creeps a little closer, but every day right now, again, the trend is still up. We haven't hit the peak, and we're certainly not coming down from from all of this. Troy Vincent, the NFL's executive vice president for football operations, said the league and union consulted with medical professionals and were determined to adhere to state regulations in establishing off-season work rules. The term that kept coming up was reasonable and responsible in the current climate, Vincent said on a conference call with reporters Monday night. Yeah, but is that the question there is reasonable and responsible according to who? According to like the CEOs and the people that just want business to go on as usual so they can continue to rake in immense profits? Or is the motive there to make sure that people are actually, safe and healthy, etc., etc.? So there is that question. Also, it would be interesting if they do, if they do some sort of structure where throughout the entire offseason, I suppose this is theoretically possible, that they could do some structure throughout the entire offseason to do everything virtually. All these players do all their own like individual workouts by themselves, or I suppose maybe with, each other in small groups. There would obviously have to be like, mass testing available and stuff like that, as the Alan Sills, I think it was, if I remember correctly, stated that was one of the requirements for the year to start as normal, or on time rather. But they could theoretically even play throughout the season. They just maybe would do it not with any crowds at all, just completely empty stadiums, right? I mean, the Pope just gave an address for Easter Sunday to an empty church. It was all virtual, so maybe, if they tested all the players and the coaches and all the staff that they need, they could theoretically, I suppose, get them in to play the game in an empty stadium. It would be super weird, and I don't know if they would do that. I don't know. So, but I suppose theoretically there is some way you could make that work. I don't know. It's just, we're still a little ways from that, so we'll wait until we get closer before that actually becomes like a big, topic. But it is interesting to think about anyway. Let's see. Teams conducting virtual workouts will be allowed to contact their players to determine whether they have the equipment they need and whether they'd be willing to wear monitoring devices to track their workouts to certify that they've completed them. Players who do not have the required equipment to complete the virtual offseason workouts assigned by their teams may be sent additional workout equipment at a maximum cost of $1,500 per player. That cost will be paid by the team. If team facilities remain closed in June, teams will be allowed to conduct mandatory minicamps for veterans, provided that 1. Any online classroom instruction may not exceed 2 hours. 2. Any virtual workouts may not exceed 2 hours. And 3, the club may schedule the times for these activities as it chooses. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that's why I was saying, like, the workouts, all of these workouts actually could be done virtually. But when it gets to like training camp and they actually have to do like 7 on 7s and 9 on 11s, 11 drills, right? And stuff like that, team stuff, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do things virtually. There are still, like I said, theoretical ways, I suppose, that they could make it work, but there would have to be so many like safety precautions set into place that there would be a, like redundancy after redundancy to make sure that none of these people, get it or have it or blah, 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 or whatever. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know. Like I said, it was still a little ways from that. But they absolutely can do this stuff virtually for now. Like I said, it's certainly something that can work for a bit. Under pre-existing rules, NFL teams that hired new head coaches this offseason would have been allowed to start their offseason programs April 6th, while teams that didn't would have been allowed to start April 20th. Teams with new head coaches were allowed to send playbooks to their players last week, but have held off on establishing virtual offseason meetings or workouts until the league and union finalize the plan. Under the newly established 2020 offseason rules, teams with new head coaches must wait until April 20th to begin their offseason programs, assuming they choose to do so at all. And teams with returning head coaches can begin April 27th. Teams with new head coaches may conduct an additional voluntary veteran minicamp beginning May 11th. So, those dates have just essentially been pushed back. Instead of, the earlier part of April, it's now the back end of April. They pushed it back by like a week or 2 weeks, whatever. So not much of a difference. And obviously now that they've established some sort of like guidelines for, virtual workouts, etc. Like I said, this is definitely something that can work for now, but it is absolutely just a band-aid and something that will become much harder to contain and work as some sort of feasible option if they want to have the season go on as planned. All right, so the last thing that I want to talk about is because this rumor mill has not stopped. It has not ceased to put out more and more speculation as to what is going to go on with the Dolphins, and are the Bengals willing to trade out, blah 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 blah. So, but this in particular, this report, there have been a couple places now that have reported. This one is from an article from Sports Illustrated. I got it through my Bleacher Report feed, but it's a Sports Illustrated article. And report, Dolphins head coach Brian Flores and general manager Chris Grier don't want to, quote, trade the farm for Joe Burrow. Okay, so that goes, that right there gives you the indication that, the GM and the head coach don't want to, overpay just to chase the one guy. Okay, and that's smart, right? But at the end of the day, and we'll get into this more as the article goes on, I personally don't believe that really matters much, because look, Stephen Ross has made it clear that they want a quarterback. Almost all their moves have indicated that they're going to do that. All last year was tanking to specifically set themselves up to get the top signal caller from this draft. They they have 14 picks and they clearly set themselves up. People can argue over, whether they tanked or not, which is ridiculous because they clearly did. But they gave themselves enough ammunition to trade up from that 5th spot after having won a few games all the way to the number 1 spot if they so chose. And they talk about, and we'll get to this in a minute, but there was some quotes from, I can't remember who off the top of my head, I'm sure we'll get to it in a minute, but of someone was saying that they don't think Stephen Ross is going to pull the owner card and make them go chase the quarterback. Why not? Why not? What indications do you have that would tell you Stephen Ross is not going to do that? He has intervened. I mean, if you're saying, well, Stephen Ross has never intervened in the decisions before, well, that's not true. It would be true if you said that he didn't veto the Minkah Fitzpatrick pick and opt for a quarterback instead. Then yes, he was a little bit more hands off, but he made it pretty clear that that's not what he would have done, and he tried to get them to trade back and accrue more draft capital after the top signal callers were off the board, and especially after the Arizona Cardinals jumped them to get Josh Rosen. So, and then the whole, I mean, everything, absolutely every single data point, aside from a few statements and some reports speculating on this, the tangible, hardcore evidence that we have, all of it suggests that they are going to seek and destroy for wherever fucking spot they feel that they need to get to draft the top signal caller. Anyway, let's get into this article though. Rumors have swirled about the Dolphins' interest in trading up with the Bengals to get the number 1 pick so they can draft LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. Now, but real quick, sorry, let's note though that maybe it's not Joe Burrow. Maybe they want the number 1 pick simply to ensure that they get the quarterback that they want. Okay, maybe they feel like the only way to get the quarterback that they want is that number 1 pick. Maybe it's Justin Herbert, right? Maybe Tua Tagovailoa has too many injury concerns at this point and has fallen down everybody's board, at least a little bit because of that. They're not willing to take him at 5, even if he did fall to them there. And then let's say, I mean, there's been tons of talk about how Justin Herbert is flying up boards. Maybe they jump to the number 1 spot to take Justin Herbert instead, right? What was it? Was it the year Baker Mayfield came out? Last year or the year before that? 2 years ago, right? For the vast majority of that draft, he was not... No, was it that year? There was... In the past couple years, I don't want to get into this too much because I'm not going to have my facts right. But in the past couple years, there was a quarterback that was taken first overall that wasn't expected to be taken first overall, if I can remember correctly. I'll have to look into that, so I'm not going to get into it. But the point is unexpected things happen all the time. Right, so we could think that it would be Joe Burrow if they jumped up there. He's the Heisman Trophy winner, set crazy records, etc. But maybe it's Justin Herbert they take. So that is a possibility. Maybe it's not necessarily just that they're going to jump to number 1 for Burrow. It sounds like the organization could be torn on the idea. Peter King, because they might not think then that him or Burrow will last until 5, right? Anyway. So, Peter King reported Monday that General Manager Chris Grier and head coach Brian Flores aren't willing to give up too much in a potential blockbuster trade. And a couple other quick things. If Stephen Ross says to do it, they're going to do it. Especially because look at what they have already done at his demand. Not request, demand. He told them people can continue arguing it if they want, but I'm sorry, if anybody has this argument, you're stupid because it doesn't make any sense and it's not founded in fact. They tanked last year, okay? And both Brian Flores and Chris Grier full on bought into that and did absolutely everything in their power to ensure that they implemented the base philosophies of tanking, i.e., they dumped their entire roster of proven talent, leadership, etc., etc. They built a practice squad team, filled with young guys, inexperienced guys, backups, rookies, undrafted guys, etc. They accumulated all the draft capital and the cap space. Those are the 3 fundamental things that you do, and you trade away a bunch of your guys to accumulate that stuff. In the process of purging your roster. They did the fundamental things. And everybody wants to just say, well, that was the front office and Chris Grier and Marvin Allen, Reggie McKenzie. No, it was them. But it was also Brian Flores who admitted that he had a hand in every single transaction that the Dolphins made. And then, of course, at the behest of Stephen Ross. And so they tanked. And then, if you follow me and if you've watched my channel and my videos, then that I believe, and there's plenty of significant evidence to show that on the field decisions that they made and personnel they decided to keep off and on the inactives list or put on the inactives list, how they decided to use certain personnel throughout the season, decisions they made when it came to like challenges or not challenging things and timeouts, play calling. There was instance after instance of questionable decision that in most circumstances or any other circumstance, you might just say, well, it's a fresh, first year head coach, new players, young team, blah, blah, blah. But when you have the added context that the team is intentionally tanking, not just in the storylines, but also through their actions, well, then it's par for the course at that point. Of course, what they're doing on the field is to fit that same fucking philosophy. Anyway. So they tanked, okay, and they set themselves up for this. So if Stephen Ross says, do it, they're not going to say no, especially also because guess what? He pays their fucking paychecks. Anyway, I do hear that he and Coach Brian Flores are very much against trading the farm to move up to get Burrow, which some in the organization want to do. So apparently there are some. And what if one of those some is Stephen Ross? And what if he says to do it? And again, maybe they're not, maybe they're not necessarily okay with trading up for Joe Burrow, but what if they're okay with trading up for Herbert? Or again, either way, if Stephen Ross says it, it doesn't matter. Anyway, let's see. I doubt owner Stephen Ross will pull the owner card. So Stephen King wrote this. Peter King, sorry. Peter King wrote this. I doubt owner Stephen Ross will pull the owner card and force a mega offer to try to move up to number 1. But we'll see, he says. Yes, we will see, indeed. And I will report it factually. I will be doing a live stream for the draft, the virtual draft. And so you will see me say it, live and in person. I will tell you if they made a trade up to the number 1 spot or not. Why? Because it will be fact. And so we will see exactly what it is that they do. Or if they trade up and they take Herbert, I will tell you exactly that. But it is not anywhere near to out of the realm of possibility. In fact, there is a substantial probability that is exactly what will happen. The Dolphins have plenty of ammo to offer the Bengals, who plan to draft Burrow on April 23rd. Miami has 5 first-round picks in the next 2 drafts, including 3 this season. It's hard to envision the Dolphins getting a deal done with the Bengals. Why? That's a strange last sentence to that paragraph. That whole paragraph was about, 3/4 of that paragraph, which was like 4 sentences. It's like 4 sentences. So 3 of those sentences were the Dolphins have all of this ammunition and they could totally do it. But it's hard to envision that the Dolphins get a deal done with the Bengals. Well, why? Why? Because again, the only thing that anybody can really point to is the Bengals are saying that they don't want to trade the number 1 pick. Okay, but first of all, that's just reporters. Even if they have contacts in the building, those contacts could be lying to them. Shocker, right? They might be lying. So it's distinctly possible that the one thing that they say that they're not going to do is the one thing that they do, is the exact thing that they do. If there's a guy there that you believe in that can really change the franchise over the next 10 to 15 years, then that's a hard thing to pass up on, head coach Zach Taylor said Monday on the Dan Patrick Show. People all the time ask me, what would it take to give up that pick? If there's somebody that there that people are willing to give up a lot for that they believe in, then that really verifies what we think about those players as well. The Bengals take Burrow in our latest mock draft from Sports Illustrated. So, but what if the Bengals or the Dolphins want Herbert? Maybe the Bengals actually like Herbert and maybe the Dolphins want Burrow. Whatever, it doesn't matter. right? If they can come to some sort of agreement where blah, 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 and the Bengals still think that they can either get Herbert or Burrow or maybe Tua and then let him sit for a year behind Dalton, whatever, then that the amount of draft capital that they could get from the Dolphins could be immense. It could be a massive, massive haul that they get. And if the Dolphins were to offer, and so, you know, this is how I'll wrap this up, man, because look, if the Dolphins were to offer, let's say, all 3 first-round picks this year, right, the 5th, the 18th, and the 26th, if they were to offer all of those picks plus, let's say, you know, one of our second-round picks, like maybe, you know, the 36th or the 59th, I mean, that's a huge haul. That's a huge haul. So much there. Like, it would be so worth it to drop, because at 5 they could get one of the top 3 quarterbacks. And what's the worst case scenario? Burrow and Herbert are off the board for them at that point, but then they can get Tua at 5. Or maybe they take one of the top defensive players in the draft, Isaiah Simmons or Chase Young or Jeffrey Okudah, whatever, and then they still have 2 more first round picks this year. I mean, we'll have to wait and see, but we're closing in 9 days away, or excuse me, 10 days away, and we don't have much longer to wait. So, all right, guys, I'm gonna get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoyed my videos and perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.